Robert Lang spoke, his voice calm and decisive, cutting through the tension in the room. You must be part of the team, or you're out. He slid the termination papers across the table, the smile on his face not reaching his eyes. Elena, the decision is yours. I stared at the document bearing my name, Elena Morales, senior accountant at Fairview Holdings, and a strange sense of tranquility washed over me. 6 years of unwavering dedication, countless late nights leading to this moment, forced to choose between my career and my integrity. In a tone steadier than I expected, I responded, I will not falsify the financial statements for this audit. Not for you, nor anyone else. Robert's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. Then I suppose we are done here, he said, showing no emotion. I didn't argue, didn't plead. I simply took the pen and signed the termination papers. No defiance, no outbursts. I just signed away 6 years of my life at Fairview Holdings, a real estate investment company I had helped build into a respected name in Hartford, Connecticut. As I was escorted out by security to clear my workstation, I could feel my colleagues' eyes following me. Some looked away, too uncomfortable to watch, while others observed with undisguised curiosity. Vanessa, my assistant, approached, eyes brimming with tears, but security intervened. The guard instructed me to only take my personal items from the drawer. The company-owned laptops and phones remained in use. I nodded as I carefully packed a cardboard box with a few books, my coffee mug, and framed photos. They didn't know that I had anticipated this moment for a long time. For months, I had quietly documented every questionable directive, archived incriminating emails, and captured screenshots of Slack conversations where the executives discussed creative accounting and manipulating the numbers for the upcoming audit. At 39, I was too experienced to be fooled. 3 months ago, I clearly saw the direction they were pushing me toward, forcing me to alter financial documents. I had witnessed this pattern in other organizations where subtle signals gradually turned into direct demands, ultimately leading to fraud. As I walked through the lobby for the last time, box in hand, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass doors. Despite the turmoil inside me, my expression remained calm, my dark hair neatly pulled back as usual. Today wasn't just the end of my job, it was the beginning of a moral decision that would change my life and the lives of others. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, I would show Robert Lang and the entire executive team the consequences of firing the only person who knows the dark secrets and the one who followed the procedures without ever deviating. My condo in downtown Hartford, which had always been my sanctuary, had now become a battlefield. The printed copies of emails, financial statements, and meeting notes scattered across my dining table were physical backups of the digital trail I had carefully preserved over the past few months. I had always been the meticulous record keeper, the one who never missed a detail. That was my most valuable asset, and according to my ex-husband Jason, it was also the reason for the breakdown of our marriage 3 years ago. He once said during an argument, "You're too rigid, Elena." Life isn't a ledger. Perhaps he was right about life, but in the world of accounting, precision is everything. At this moment, the only thing I had was precision. I pulled up the email I had drafted earlier that day, addressed to all 7 members of the Fairview Holdings Board of Directors. It was brief, clear, and devoid of any emotional language or accusations. The full truth, in black and white, with dozens of attachments proving systematic financial manipulation, was ordered by Chief Financial Officer Robert Lang and approved by Chief Executive Officer Thomas Wilson. A moment of doubt crept in as my finger hovered over the send button. Was I truly ready for the consequences? Once I hit send, there would be no turning back. Some would call me a whistleblower, while others would curse me. My phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "They're saying you resigned due to tremendous pressure. Lang has already interviewed your successor," was all I needed to hear. And with that, I hit send. Within minutes, my email was received by the board of directors, Fairview's independent auditors, and the legal team. Now, all that was left was to wait, as the truth had been exposed. I stepped out onto my small balcony, poured myself a glass of wine, and gazed at the city's twinkling lights. 6 years ago, I joined Fairview Holdings full of hope. At the time, the company was primarily focused on affordable housing projects and ethical investments when it was still quite small. Over time, however, as profit became the only metric that mattered, everything changed. 3 months ago, when Robert first suggested adjusting our debt-to-equity ratio to attract a potential investor, I felt uneasy. He dismissed it as a common industry practice, but I kept recording every trace, especially when he instructed me to reclassify certain expenses to inflate our quarterly earnings report. I had known that my time at Fairview was coming to an end when he instructed me to set up a shell subsidiary to hide underperforming assets before the audit a month ago. I just didn't expect everything to end so suddenly. As I stood looking out at the Hartford skyline, I wondered how many other companies were hiding similar secrets behind their gleaming windows, and how many other accountants, like me today, were faced with an impossible decision. The response came quicker than I anticipated. By 8 a.m. the following morning, I received calls from 3 board members, including Chairwoman Diana Frost, who had always impressed me as the most ethical member of the leadership team. She informed me, her voice somber, that we had scheduled an emergency board meeting for noon. The evidence you've provided is, to say the least, concerning. Would you be willing to join a conference call with us? I agreed, spending the morning organizing my documentation and preparing my statement. At exactly noon, I dialed into the call. Ms. Morales, your materials have been reviewed by the board, Diana began after the introductions. We've also consulted with our legal advisor about our next steps. However, before proceeding, we would like to hear your direct feedback regarding the events that transpired. For the next 30 minutes, I walked them through the entire process. From the subtle suggestions to improve the numbers to the explicit requests to manipulate the data. I explained the increasing pressure and the ultimatum Robert gave me, which ultimately led to my termination. Do you have any documentation to back all of this up? Asked Gregory Patel, a board member with a skeptical tone. I confirmed that each instance was documented with emails, meeting notes, or recorded conversations in compliance with Connecticut's one-party consent laws. I've been in accounting for 17 years, Mr. Patel. I understand the importance of evidence. The room fell silent. They believed me. But more importantly, they were aware that I had them in my sights. They would be guilty of complicity if they failed to act on this information. Diana ultimately expressed her gratitude for Ms. Morales' candor. Please ensure that your phone is in close proximity. Our legal team will contact you. 3 hours later, I received an email notification from Fairview Holdings regarding an urgent press release. The statement announced the immediate suspension of CEO Thomas Wilson and Robert Lang pending the completion of a comprehensive, independent investigation into alleged financial irregularities. The company had also self-reported to the Securities and Exchange Commission and would be entirely compliant with any regulatory inquiries. Almost immediately, my phone rang. Vanessa was the individual in question. She murmured, "The office is in a state of disarray. Lang and Wilson were recently escorted out of the premises by security. There is speculation that the federal government may become involved. Elena, what actions did you take?" I stated the truth in a straightforward manner. Diana Frost sent me a formal email that evening, requesting that we meet in person the following day. A portion of me contemplated whether they intended to muzzle me by utilizing a non-disclosure agreement and settlement offer, which is a prevalent corporate strategy for managing whistleblowers. I received a LinkedIn notification on my phone as I was getting ready for bed. A message was sent to me by a former colleague who is currently employed at Veltrix Optics. Heard the events that transpired at Fairview. We are in search of a new finance director who is ethically sound. Are you intrigued? I was moved to weeping by the message. Tears of relief, validation, and perhaps a hint of pride. I had placed my career on the line in the hope that integrity would ultimately be recognized. It appeared that the initial evidence was now emerging to substantiate that assertion. Nevertheless, I was aware that this narrative was far from over as I drifted off to slumber. New battles were to be encountered in the morning, as the genuine fallout was just commencing. By the time I arrived for my appointment with Diana Frost the following morning, Fairview Holdings stock had plummeted by nearly 15%. The lobby of the company's headquarters, which is typically a hub of activity, was ominously silent, with the exception of a few reporters who were waiting outside in the hopes of securing an insider's comment. I was immediately transported to the executive floor by security personnel, the same floor from which I had been escorted in disgrace just 2 days prior. The irony was not lost on me. Diana was in the boardroom with 2 individuals she introduced as Terrence Walker from the firm's legal department and Josephine Alvarez, an attorney from an external law firm that specializes in corporate compliance. Diana initiated the conversation by expressing gratitude for Elena's attendance. "We have commenced a comprehensive, independent investigation. However, the board considered it crucial to obtain your viewpoint regarding the potential extent of these issues." Josephine intervened to clarify that Ms. Morales is present voluntarily and should be regarded as a whistleblower protected under federal law, rather than as a hostile party. I valued the attorney's candor, although I suspected that her primary objective was to mitigate Fairview's liability rather than safeguard me. Certainly, Diana consented without any difficulty. "Elena, we are grateful for your 18 years of experience in financial compliance and are optimistic that you will be able to assist us in comprehending the complete extent of our situation." I corrected reflexively for 17 years. It was a minor detail, but in my world, accuracy was of the utmost importance. Over the course of the subsequent hour, I guided them through the progression of the accounting irregularities, which had initially been modest in nature but had become increasingly flagrant as the company faced external financial pressures. I provided an explanation of how Robert had compartmentalized the deceptive practices, ensuring that different team members worked on isolated sections so that no one besides him had the complete picture. I am the only one. That is, I was the central hub of all financial information in my capacity as a senior accountant. What is your assessment of the number of additional individuals who were intentionally involved? Terrence inquired, meticulously documenting his inquiries. I replied, I can only confirm Robert Lang and Thomas Wilson based on direct evidence. Many others may have surmised, but Robert was meticulous in ensuring that the majority of the team maintained plausible deniability. Diana leaned forward. "Elena, I will be forthright. The board is willing to provide you with a substantial promotion and compensation increase in exchange for your reinstatement. In an effort to rectify our course, we require an individual who possesses your institutional expertise and ethical standards." I was taken aback by the offer. I had anticipated legal threats or a severance package with conditions. This is not it. Your offer is greatly appreciated. I spoke with precision. However, I am uncertain whether returning is the optimal course of action for either of us. Diana's expression implied astonishment. It was evident that she was not accustomed to having her proposals rejected. "Would you be able to provide an explanation?" "The compensation would be quite generous." I stated that the issues at Fairview are more complex than those of Robert and Thomas. For years, the board has received periodic reports. You authorized executive incentives that were contingent upon financial metrics that were evidently unfeasible in hindsight. The board either failed to fulfill its fiduciary duty of oversight, or some of you were aware and chose to ignore the situation. A hush descended upon the chamber. Terrence ceased writing altogether, while Josephine shifted uncomfortably. Diana eventually stated, her voice trembling, "That is a grave allegation." I responded that it is an observation that is based on financial data, which is my area of expertise. This is the reason I am of the opinion that my credibility as a whistleblower would be jeopardized if I were to return to Fairview's payroll. I observed a notification on my phone as the meeting concluded without resolution. An email from the Securities and Exchange Commission requesting an interview. I had recently declined the company's attempt to reinstate me, and the federal investigation was now officially ongoing. I experienced a sense of lightness as I exited Fairview for the final time. Although the path ahead was unpredictable, it was at least mine. Benjamin Harris, the investigative reporter whose coverage of the Fairview scandal had garnered national attention, and I were seated in a downtown cafe 3 weeks later. What had initially been a local business story had evolved into a comprehensive expose of corporate deception that caused significant disruptions in the real estate investment sector. Benjamin inquired, "Are you okay with me directly quoting you on the timeline of events that led to your termination?" as he reviewed his notes. I nodded, examining the most recent version of his article on his tablet. All of the information that has been attributed to me is accurate. However, it is important to remember our agreement. The purpose of this interview is to discuss corporate accountability, not personal vendettas. He concurred, returning the tablet, despite the fact that users appreciate a personal perspective. Is there any interest in discussing the experience of witnessing Fairview's stock plummet by 30% since the scandal was disclosed? I drank my coffee with care, contemplating my response. I derive no pleasure from witnessing the decline of a company that I assisted in the establishment of, Benjamin. The decisions of a small number have resulted in the uncertainty that many honest employees are currently experiencing. He appeared disheartened, but he took note. That is acceptable. What is the status of the SEC investigation? According to sources, you have participated in numerous interviews with federal investigators. I replied that I am unable to provide commentary on an ongoing investigation. The response was both precise and practiced. An inbound call from a number that I did not recognize interrupted our conversation. Typically, I would have allowed the call to be directed to voicemail. However, I was compelled to respond. I excused myself from the table, stating that Elena Morales was speaking. "Dear Ms. Morales, I am William Bennett, the Chief Compliance Officer at Thornmere Financial." I was immediately drawn to the name of one of Fairview's most significant competitors. I was anticipating that we could convene to deliberate on an opportunity. I returned to Benjamin, who was observing me with undisguised inquiry, and I arranged a meeting for the following day. "An additional employment opportunity?" he inquired. "That is the third one I have observed you take since we first sat down." This was accurate. I had received inquiries from numerous companies seeking financial compliance leadership in the week following the scandal's disclosure. Depending on the priorities of a company, my reputation as the whistleblower who brought down Fairview's executive team rendered me both highly desirable and radioactive. Would you be inclined to believe me if I claimed that the contact was a cold one regarding the extension of my car's warranty? I made a joke. Benjamin chuckled. "Absolutely not." His demeanor became increasingly grave. "Elena, there is a matter that you should be aware of prior to the publication of this article. I have discovered evidence that suggests that Fairview's unscrupulous practices may be directly linked to Redwood Capital Partners." The sensation of having my blood run chilly was palpable. As one of the largest private equity firms in the Northeast, Redwood had a presence in dozens of companies across a variety of industries. "What types of relationships are these?" I inquired while maintaining a moderate volume. He elaborated on the occurrence of financial flows that are illogical, overlapping board memberships, and accounting irregularities that are strikingly similar. Fairview may be exclusively the top of the iceberg. In the event that Benjamin was correct, my actions could have revealed a much more significant issue than the financial transgressions of a single company. It also implied that certain individuals of considerable influence may have legitimate concerns regarding my knowledge or potential discoveries. My phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number, as if it were a premonition. "Your argument has been effectively articulated. If you are aware of your own well-being, you should depart at this time." Benjamin's pupils widened as I presented the message to him. "Are you planning to file a report on this?" he inquired. I captured a screenshot and sent it to my attorney. Completed. The warning served as confirmation of my suspicions. I had discovered a much more significant issue than a single CFO's attempt to manipulate the accounts. The inquiry was, how deep did I wish to delve? Thornmere Financial's offices were situated on 3 floors of a modern downtown superstructure that boasted breathtaking views of the Connecticut River. William Bennett, Thornmere CEO, Victoria Larson, and a woman identified as Imani Johnson, Director of Internal Audit, were all present in a conference room during my visit. Victoria initiated the conversation after the exchange of pleasantries. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Morales. I will proceed directly to the point. The Fairview situation has been closely monitored by us, and we are genuinely impressed by your integrity." William nodded in concurrence. Companies such as ours are currently subjected to rigorous regulatory oversight. It is imperative that our compliance initiatives be led by an individual who possesses both technical proficiency and moral fortitude. Victoria continued, "We would like to extend an offer of employment to you as Chief Compliance Officer. The position would be directly accountable to me, and it would include full board access and a substantial budget for populating your department as you deem necessary." The proposal was unanticipated. This was not merely a job. It was a C-suite position that provided me with significantly more authority and compensation than I had ever received at Fairview. I responded with great care, as that is an extremely generous gesture. "I would like to inquire as to what caused you to extend such a substantial offer to an individual you have only recently encountered." William and Victoria exchanged glances. "Integrity. Fear." Victoria acknowledged, "Not of you, but of becoming the next Fairview. We require an individual who can guarantee that we are not merely maintaining compliance on paper, as the regulatory environment is evolving." I also evaluated your work when we competed with Fairview on the Westridge Development Project last year, Imani added, speaking for the first time. "Your financial forecasts were flawless. Your level of talent is exceedingly uncommon." Their candor was a welcome change. However, there was an underlying unease. The offer was too perfect and was extended to an individual who was at the center of an ongoing scandal too rapidly. I stated that I must pose a challenging inquiry prior to evaluating your proposal. "What is Thornmere's relationship with Redwood Capital Partners?" The ambience of the room abruptly altered. William's posture stiffened, and Victoria's smile faltered ever so slightly. Victoria responded with cautiousness. "They are a minority investor in certain of our development projects." "What is the reason for your inquiry?" "In light of the information I have received that suggests Redwood may be associated with the same financial irregularities that I discovered at Fairview," I responded, closely monitoring their responses. "And I have recently received what could be considered a threat, advising me to cease my investigation." Imani's expression was grave as she leaned forward. "What type of peril is this?" I presented them with the anonymous text message. William expressed his apprehension after a brief period, but I am uncertain as to its relevance to our employment offer. I refuted the entirety of the statement. I would require complete independence to investigate any potential issues, regardless of the individuals involved, including significant investors, if I were to accept this position. Victoria was silent for an extended period of time before responding. "Elena, permit me to be forthright. The reason we are offering you this position is to prevent Thornmere from becoming the next financial scandal headline. It is important that we are informed of any reservations you may have regarding Redwood. Alternatively, I propose that you are already aware of Redwood's policies and are offering me this position as a means of maintaining my proximity and control." The silence that ensued was instructive. I stated, "I believe we have reached our conclusion here," as I collected my possessions. "I appreciate the time you have taken to speak with me." William overtook me as I proceeded toward the elevator. He said quietly, "You are making a mistake. We genuinely require an individual of your caliber." I responded, "Then demonstrate it. Begin by requesting a comprehensive internal audit of all initiatives that involve Redwood, which will be conducted by an independent firm that is not affiliated with either company. Once that is accomplished, we can resume our conversation." William appeared contemplative in the hallway as I entered the elevator. I was unable to suppress my curiosity as the doors closed. Was I declining a legitimate opportunity? Or had I just narrowly evaded a snare that had been set by the very individuals I was now investigating? The sex investigation proceeded at an unexpected pace. I sat in a federal building conference room with my counsel 6 weeks after my initial whistleblower report, as Special Agent Diaz presented the charges against Fairview's former executives. He clarified that Robert Lang and Thomas Wilson will be charged with conspiracy, filing false financial statements, and securities fraud. Based in large part on the evidence you have presented, Ms. Morales. Layla Jackson, my counsel, nodded in agreement. Additionally, what about the council members? Agent Diaz continued. Failure to perform fiduciary duties and willful blindness are being charged against 2 board members, including former Chair Diana Frost. A complex and ongoing investigation into Redwood Capital is currently underway. I comprehended the subtext. Redwood possessed an army of attorneys and potent connections. The investigation would be significantly more time-consuming and encounter substantial opposition. What is the next course of action? I inquired. Now, Layla clarified. We are preparing for depositions and prospective trial testimony. Additionally, you contemplate your intentions regarding your subsequent professional endeavors. I had been burdened by that inquiry. I had received an abundance of job proposals. However, following the Thornmere incident, I was hesitant to enter another potentially compromised situation. A business card was passed across the table by Agent Diaz. There is an individual at the Financial Crimes Division who is interested in discussing a consulting position with you when you are prepared. Your expertise would be highly beneficial. I was taken aback when I accepted the card. I had never considered collaborating with federal regulators. However, it seemed to make a certain amount of logic. Who is more qualified to assist in the capture of financial criminals than an individual who has personally exposed them? Layla presented me with a folder as we exited the building. The final whistleblower award determination was received. The SEC is providing you with 15% of the penalties that were imposed on Fairview. I nearly tripped over the steps when I opened the folder. The sum was astonishing. More than €2 million. That is substantial. I succeeded. Layla grinned. This is the consequence of revealing a deception valued at hundreds of millions. Elena, congratulations. You did the correct thing. For the first time, it proved advantageous. For the first time since the commencement of this ordeal, I permitted myself to experience a sense of vindication. 1 year later, I occupied the podium at a corporate ethics conference where I observed the room, which was swarming with financial professionals, regulators, and compliance officers. An unexpectedly large audience attended my keynote address on ethical accounting in the context of duress. I advised them that the pressure to compromise does not occur abruptly. It commences with modest requests, justifications, and a culture that places a higher value on outcomes than on methods. By the time an individual requests that you engage in blatant fraud, you have frequently already been conditioned to respond favorably. Integrity Financial Advisory, the consulting firm I had established 6 months prior, was represented by my team in the front row. I had established a practice that specialized in forensic accounting and ethical compliance systems, utilizing my whistleblower award as initial capital. I continued, real integrity is not merely rejecting fraud. It is establishing systems in which transparency is the norm and ethical behavior is rewarded, rather than the exception. A familiar visage approached me as I mingled with attendees following the speech. Vanessa, my erstwhile assistant at Fairview. She expressed her admiration by embracing me, despite the fact that I am somewhat biased due to my employment with the speaker. I grinned. Vanessa's appointment as my organization's operations director was among my initial decisions. Her character had been irrefutably established by her loyalty during the Fairview scandal. Regarding the new consumers, how are they progressing? I inquired. She responded, we have recently signed Oakland Technologies in the span of 6 months. This equates to 14 consumers. Additional personnel will be required. I reassured her that we would locate them. Individuals who prioritize integrity over convenience. I observed Robert Lang's name trending on my phone's news notifications as we conversed. The headline was concise. The former CFO of Fairview has been sentenced to 8 years in prison for securities fraud. I did not experience any pleasure upon his downfall. Rather, it served as a quiet confirmation that the system occasionally functioned as intended. Justice, like proper accounting, had ultimately reconciled its books. I was not pursuing personal vindication or destroying careers in order to exact my revenge. It had been about truth, demonstrating that integrity is the sole currency that never devalues in the realm of finance as it is in life. I had not only reconstructed my career in the aftermath of the scandal, but I had also transformed it into something more meaningful. I was assisting other companies in avoiding similar fates while Fairview was struggling to recover under new leadership. Occasionally, the most effective form of retribution is not to eliminate one's adversaries, but rather to construct a superior entity from the ruins of what they have stolen.